taking a chance. Like birds of a feather.
Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today. If there's ever anything that goes wrong, like in the last episode, like our video cut out at the very last second,
but nobody's going to notice that because
we're just trying to be on brand. It was an intentional part, and we're still just recording. I'm just sitting here hitting a record button, here at our house, and so anyway, I just wanted to put that disclaimer out. So hopefully you all appreciate that.
And I think that that's probably a good introduction to this. This very popular podcast on toddlers.
Yes, so
because,
true.
Because there is nothing that teaches you that you're not in control, like having a little one.
So raise your hand if you have a toddler.
So it's so funny listening to this podcast. So this is a podcast that we released 8 years ago when our now 12-year-old was 4 years old. And I just can't even believe that it's been that long.
Yeah.
But now we still spend time with toddlers because now we have our grandchildren. So just today, we took our granddaughter, one of our granddaughters who is 3. We brought her to mass with us, and we take them to mass fairly often. I mean, either the 3-year-old or we have 2 3-year-old grandchildren right now, or the other little ones. And it is amazing. This is going to sound crazy to all of you who are wrangling toddlers right now. It is amazing how easy these kids are in mass. And I wonder, I think part of it is them because they do have great parents. But I think part of it is us that we've just kind of like really learned. In this podcast, you'll hear I talk about we had toddlers in our 20s and in our 30s and in our 40s. And now we have toddlers in our 50s. But they are our grandchildren toddlers. And so I feel like we really have learned so much. And just re-listening to the wisdom, what I'm hearing, listening to the old 8-year-old us, I'm like, I think a lot of these things definitely still apply.
Yeah. So take a listen to this episode. Before you do that, I just wanted to make mention, we've talked about this before. We have the Women Wonderfully Made, the mother-daughter course that Alicia is now offering for the first time and our first ever on demand. So you can do it at your own pace.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of time refining, increasing, actually enhancing the entire course and the offering that we have.
The workbooks are beautiful. The downloads, I think everything, it's a really valuable course.
Yeah.
For
so
sure.
Anyway, so you can go to messyfamilyproject.org to click on courses, and you'll see information on that, as well as the upcoming Catholic parenting course, and we'll be offering the family board meeting course as well.
Courses.
In case you're looking for formation, I feel like that's what we've been leaning more into. And hopefully that serves you. All right, but let's want to just jump right in.
Yeah, and at the end, we're going to have some key takeaways as well as a couple discussion questions. So wait for those at the end.
To jump right into it, you have been a teacher in the past, so you have a little bit of insight into this more than just your parenting of 10. We've gotten through 10 toddlers in our own household, but you've had more in your
Seen
classes.
hundreds of toddlers,
right?
yes, through my classes and things. So toddlers are defined as children between the ages of about 14, 15 months to probably about 3. So developmentally, when kids start walking, that's more than a physical thing.
Okay.
Walking is a psychological thing as well. Development in the brain that is unique to the walking stage starts happening at that point, and that continues until... And they're walking because we are not, most people probably realize this, but we don't really think about it, that we are not separate. Our bodies, our minds, our souls, we're all one person.
That's the beauty of some of the Catholic teaching. We're body, soul, composite, and all of that. One whole person.
And so developmentally, especially for children, what they do with their bodies is developing their brain.
Okay.
A child who is restricted from movement, like in very horrible or unfortunate situations where kids are somehow restricted in, abusive situations, their minds are not going to develop in the same way as those children who have unrestricted movement. So a child walking starts developing their brain in a just kind of like, they start like taking off there until they're around 3 years old, which is usually when they're ready for more group level activities like preschool and things like that.
So
toddlers are basically between the time that they start walking and that
About
like
3
around
years.
3. Yeah. Because
okay.
there's
So-
and it's not the same for everybody, because
and they
kids
call
are
them
so
toddlers
different.
because they are toddling. They are weeble wobbles, but they don't fall down. Well, they do fall down.
They fall down a lot.
So-
as a matter of fact, can I just say one thing?
No,
too?
no,
I
no,
remember
you can't.
hearing this article where they, Dr. Dobson talks about this, about they built a room like it was like a scale model of what a toddler experience is, and they like filmed a toddler and all the times that they climbed and fell down and got up and like their routine during the day, and they put a like Olympic like gymnast through the routine that a toddler does on the scale with things
For an
around
adult,
him.
yeah.
Exactly. And the gymnast could not make it to nap time. Like he couldn't make it because we do not realize everything that those kids are doing, and they're doing it on a diet of like lollipops and Cheerios.
That's right. That's right.
Like-
Leftover peanut butter jelly. Yeah.
Exactly, like a crust that they found behind the couch, but yet they will not eat the wonderful healthy meal that you put in front of them. They're eating scraps off the floor. Oh Lord!
So they're very physical during this time, right?
Very, very physical during this time. So anyway, that's
And the whole psychological part is that they're learning new skills, and it's both developmentally, psychologically, mentally, as well as physically.
if you think about everything that they have to learn in that short amount of time, like people who have strokes and you have to relearn how to walk, how to talk, how to feed themselves. Basically, they're walking again through their toddler years. It takes them years and years and years and years. And they probably still will never get to
Regain
full capacity.
what it used to be.
Exactly. Whereas a toddler is learning this in a period of like 18 months.
Right.
It's amazing the development in their mind and the word capacity that they're learning. Through my kinder music training, I remember learning it was like 200 some words a week or something like that.
I
Like
wish I could do that.
I know,
That's pretty
in
amazing.
a brand new language.
That's a superpower that they could come up with, like toddler power, like you're adapting and consuming all that information. So, and through all that, they're learning independence. They're learning how to do things, walk on their own, try new things out. That's why they're pushing limits, right? That's why they're exploring new frontiers. They're like Star Trek. They're going into the unexplored for them world, and that's pretty amazing.
And it's very important. It's extremely important time because that is one of our goals as parents is, of course, to train our children in the faith, but it's also our goal is for them to be independent adults.
That's right.
And you may not think of your toddler, like you may not think down the road to them being an adult, but you have to realize this is the beginning
That's right.
of them learning independence, to do things by themselves. And it's very, very important that you do allow them this time.
Right. It's so
to
important.
be independent and to not get frustrated by it, which I think is our tendency.
Yeah, well, because there's a lot of reasons to get frustrated. They give you a million reasons a day
They're
where
frustrating.
they pull things off, they throw their food, they do all these other things, they leave their food, they take their sippy cups, they do. Everything that a toddler would do, and it's just for them. It's just it's part of their independence. It's part of their growth. It's part of their exploration.
Right.
But it does drive you crazy.
One of the things that I love about toddlers too, and we're just kind of starting here with just like the characteristics, setting the stage of who these children are. I feel like there's so
These
many
alien beings. No.
there's so many directions we can go with this topic. But I always feel like the way I think of toddlers is that they are raw personality and that they are unadulterated by social mores or by rules of society.
No etiquette involved.
There's no etiquette, and that's what your job is to
Diplomacy
teach them.
and all that other stuff is not present.
There's no diplomacy, but it's awesome. It's awesome because you can see their personality. This is who they are, and then it's this beautiful thing that you as a parent are tasked with shaping, and forming. And so it's very good, a good skill for parents to develop the skills of observation. And also, if you're not already familiar with different personality types, I would highly suggest that you educate yourself. Whether it's Myers-Briggs or the temperaments or whatever, but become familiar with that so you can become an observer of your child in And so you can really appreciate them and the way that they are made. And then also you can know best how to start forming them. So when you have a kid, if you have a kid who's a leader, that is going to be evident when they are a toddler.
That's right.
If you have a kid who is an introvert, if you have a child who is just exceptionally kind-hearted, and just sensitive to other people, you're going to see that. If you have a person who does not adapt well to change, that's going to be present. And that's going to be present in their toddler years, and it's going to be present when they're an adult too.
Right. And I always think this, that what happens and how you respond to their toddler years gets repeated later, because these are very big foundational moments in their life, their growth, their exercising, their independence, and all of that. And that'll happen again in their teenage years or preteen years, where they're going to, again, exercise independence and explore new worlds and stretch out in new ways. Not that they aren't doing that in a certain sense their whole life, but it comes back. And so the investment you make now, it really does pay off. Right. And it will help both you as a parent be more attuned and observant, as well as the child in their own formation and how to deal with new situations and new challenges and how to deal with that growth that they're going to experience.
One of the things about children is that they're very honest, and that goes with that whole raw personality thing.
Oh, Lord have mercy, yes.
Mike, we probably forgot about this. I just remembered an example of how children are so honest in prayer. And I think that they're very honest, before the Lord too.
Yes.
And when you hear them pray for different things, and we had a group of families over, we were praying with them. We were praying with them. And this one little boy, I think he was 4, so a little bit older than toddler years, but we'll just go with it. Yeah. And we asked the kids, can you tell us, what did God tell you during our prayer time? And I think he said something.
Well, what can we pray for, right?
Yeah, what can we pray? No, well, first he was kind of saying
I'm sorry, that's right.
Something about God loving him.
Did God speak to anyone here?
Oh, yeah, did God speak to him? And he said, yes, God spoke to me and told me how much he loved me. It was something, I forget, but it was something really beautiful.
Yeah, it was profound. It was like, whoa, where did this kid come from?
Yeah, and we all, all the parents looked at each other. We were like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And then when we went, and, kind of giving the young dad, kind of a thumbs up, hey, you're doing a great job catechizing this kid. But then we get to our time of intercession, and the little boy again says, I just want to pray that God will help my mom and dad to be nicer to me.
Totally honest, right? And so it went from this deep, profound insight from this child to
good job, Dad. Okay. Anyway, we were just, oh my gosh, it was so hilarious. But you know what? Just so you know, those are the kind of prayers you're going to get when you pray with toddlers.
That's right.
And it's and it's awesome because they don't really think about how are people going to receive what I'm saying. Or
That's right.
doing.
That's right. Or when they come up and say, Dad, you've got a big fat belly.
Yeah. Or say that not to Dad, but maybe to other people.
That's right. That's right.
But they just have this raw personality, this raw honesty, which is really refreshing and funny and cute and embarrassing all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really think that toddlers are, well, if you haven't learned it when your child was an infant, but it really, really kind of emphasized to you that you're not in control.
That's right.
You're really not in control. And it's really, I think for first-time parents, that's one of the reasons that it's actually not even first-time parents, for all parents, because it was difficult for us too, even with our last two. Our youngest right now is 4. But it's just a constant reminder of these are not little robots. And toddlers definitely emphasize that to you. They are not little robots.
Although they do seem like a destruction machine sometimes.
Exactly.
Which then also, again, we kind of talked about this already, but the idea that they love exploration.
Yes.
They love going into new places and trying new things and climbing and jumping and plugging things into outlets or whatever it might be, which then brings up the whole safety issue. You know, as they're doing this, again, the exploration, we have to love it, but we also have to recognize that we are the parents. We do know best. We'll talk about that more later, but we have to keep them safe.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal because they are pushing limits. They will do things without fully thinking about it. So you do have to be really, this is where you toddler-proof your house,
And I feel like I would call this the age of constantly trying to kill themselves by putting things in their mouth, by running, different places, by, depending on the personality of your toddler and how determined they are to explore, you really do have to be so aware. As a parent, we started, this is when we started locking our kids in their rooms, like have a lock outside the door, just like a little hook and eye, because I was always afraid that when they would, in the middle of the night or something, they would get out of their beds and get out of the, and be walking around the house or something like that. It's just something to be aware of. And I think that
I remember
most
a friend
parents
of
are
ours
pretty good
took
at that.
the playpen and put it upside down and made it a cage. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know if I would do that.
Just kidding.
But I think that's putting a lock on the outside of the door is probably good enough. But there's many, many articles about safety. I don't think you need to go crazy. I think in our society, we kind of maybe go a little bit overboard with the safety thing in some instances. But
there's some serious, with like
to be aware of.
household chemicals and things of that nature, things to put
Exactly.
up on shelves, things to keep out of their reach.
Right.
Recognizing that they're also smart. I mean, I've seen a toddler get stools and climb up on counters and stuff like that. And
my sister, her son used to push up a chair, climb up on the counter, climb up on top of the fridge and get stuff. Our daughter Claire went up to our neighbors and untied this knot to get into a fence where their pool was.
Right,
and it
scary.
wasn't even like, it was just like she undid this knot and oh my God. Now, thankfully she was safe and all of that. But they're very, very smart.
Yeah.
and they're very determined. And this is we're going to go right into, kind of how to deal with toddlers from here. But I think that will and that determination is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Because in some ways you have to realize, even though toddlers' determination is very frustrating for parents, you have to realize how important it is. Because they have so much that they need to learn in this period of time. If they were like most adults and kind of tend to look more lazy and kind of sit back and just like let things come to them, it would extremely hinder their development.
That's right. This is huge.
And so they need one of the things that I want you to try to get into your mind, and just with some nuances, but realize that what they want, they need. Now, I don't mean like they want candy, so they need candy. But what I mean is that if they're freaking out because they want to get out of their stroller and walk around,
right,
it's because they really need that. And your response as a parent, of course, you're the one that has to examine the situation and see if that's reasonable and safe for them to do at that time. And so I'm not saying you have to give them that all the time, but for you to have that attitude of they're not just being selfish in the same unvirtuous sense that like maybe a teenager is selfish.
Right.
They really need that. They are screaming about they want to pour their own cereal, or they want to zip up their jacket, or because they need to do that. And so I think that we need to kind of retrain our brains to not look at this child as a little sinner, even though in some ways they're affected by original sin, but they are more pure than you are.
Yeah.
They really are. They are not capable of sin in the way that you are, because they are not to that age of reason yet. Even though I know that's hard for some parents to believe, because you're like, really? Really? Because it really feels like they're sinning against me because they're being
pushing me
disrespectful or dishonest or disobedient or whatever. And yes, they are, but it's not the same.
There's no culpability.
Aspect.
Or
There's
limited or no culpability.
There's limited to zero culpability for a child. This is what the church teaches us, which is why they don't go to confession until they're 7.
That's right. That's right.
This is the church's idea, not mine.
That's right. And,
So-
and this is true no matter what stage of parenting. You are the first educators of your children.
Yes.
And this is where the rubber first hits the road, I think,
So true.
on a big way, is that you're looking at your child, recognizing their gifts, their talents, what's developmentally appropriate and possible, so that you can shape and fashion them, because you're going to have to make some very difficult decisions when they're freaking out in different situations, or when they're really trying to do something. There are times when you're like, for the good of the family, I'm just going to zip up their jacket right now, or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
Or I'm going to invest time so that they're learning, they're exploring, they're growing, and I'm teaching and shaping them. I mean, so there's all this balance, this ebb and flow that you as a parent, you need to exercise that. And I believe that we need to tap into the grace of our marriage, the sacramental grace of our marriage, to help parent these kids. I believe that's what we have those grace for. So call upon it. You need it. Survive it, but also enjoy it. I mean, that's what we want to really share, is that this is about enjoying these toddler years because they are precious and they are powerful. They might be frustrating, but they are also such a joy. There's amazing stuff that God's putting into our time with them during these toddler years.
One thing that is a great, there's many blessings of having a big family, but one of the blessings is that we were able to have toddlers when we were in our 20s, and then in our 30s, and in our 40s as well. And so I think that having our last two children, our last two toddlers, were when we were in our early 40s, and I feel like we were able to just really enjoy them more than we did. Unfortunately, our oldest two kids, our guinea pigs, Katie and Patrick.
Yeah, we screwed them up.
Who we had,
But we have a counseling fund set aside for them, so it's okay.
But our last two, when they were toddlers, we just were able to enjoy them. And that's the one kind of theme that we want to bring through this podcast, is just take some time to just relax and just really enjoy your toddler and just the beautiful creation that they are.
That's right.
And I think part of enjoying that is really educating yourself developmentally. One of the great gifts my mom gave us was the value of continuing to educate yourself and continuing to learn. Even today, my parents are constantly reading books and going to Bible studies and things like that. But when my mom was a young mother, she had not grown up around children. She was really never around kids. She had 10 children eventually herself. But when I'm the second oldest, when my sister and I were little, she started reading books. She was like, well, I have to learn about how do I parent these children. An excellent resource about the development of toddlers and young children is any book by Maria Montessori. One of her, capstone books or whatever is called The Absorbent Mind.
Yeah.
I highly recommend any parent of a toddler to read that book because it will help you to understand the needs and the appropriate development of your toddler. Also, Dr. Dobson from Focus on the Family has some excellent books, excellent resources. And we were just on the Focus on the Family website real quick before doing this podcast. They have a whole page of short little articles about toddlers that look really, really helpful. So I know he has a real love for toddlers as well, and just from a Christian perspective. So if you want to avail yourself of those to just really learn developmentally where your child is, and that will help you to know what to expect.
That's right. That's a big deal. So how do we deal with them?
So now we're going to get into our practical. Okay.
Well, so can I start with the example?
You can start with whatever you want to start with.
All right. So so we were at a soccer game yesterday, and side note, I went through the Holy Land in Rome and did not get a sunburn. Did not get attacked. We were out in the sun for hours, and
Mike is very Irish,
very, very pale white man.
He says he doesn't get tan; he gets cancer.
That's right. Skip right over getting sunburned right into cancer. But so I got a sunburn yesterday. Anyway, but we're at the soccer game, and here's this little toddler, and we're all sitting down watching the game. But this toddler, they didn't want to sit in his stroller anymore. Wanted to run around. Well.
He grabbed our football.
He grabbed our football, which is totally fine, and starts running for the field. So obviously he clearly is a very intelligent, knows that you play with a ball, even though it's a football, on the field. So he's running out to the field. He's like,
hey, I have my ball.
And
there's
again,
all these kids playing out there.
That's right.
I want to go play with them.
And for any of our international listeners, when I'm talking about football, I'm talking about American football, and we're actually watching soccer, which is European football.
Right.
Just to confuse everything there. All right, anyway, but so this little kid kept running out, and the mom kept grabbing the kid and pulling him back, grabbing the kid and pulling him back, trying to keep him safe because, the toddler's whole game here is to put my life in danger. So
and these 12-year-olds running around in soccer fields would all run him over. They would not notice a toddler in the field.
That's right. So but then so the mom's approach was to keep pulling him out. But then it was the dad then stepped in and said, hey, you want to play with the ball? And then the kid's eyes lit up and they started kind of throwing.
And he was like, hey, throw the ball to me, buddy.
And so then
it was a little boy toddler.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you saw automatically there are two different paths. One, you can try to stop and no.
Which sometimes is appropriate.
Right. Again, and sometimes, but then the dad in this situation stepped in and started to take the physicality of what this child looked at. I don't know if they intellectually thought this, but looked
instinctually,
like looked at what was really at work here. What was the need that this toddler was having for at this time? And so he took that physicality, that need for exertion of energy, of run, of play, and started playing the back and forth. And the kid didn't run out, didn't choose to run out anymore. And because he needed that, he had a need inside him that then the dad helped fulfill.
And I feel like I want to say, I mean, we live in a pretty rural area, and this dad had, his hunting shirt on. He had tattoos all over his arms. He was just like a big, loud guy. But I was like, God bless you. Good instincts, Dad. Like, it was really neat to see. But I see that a lot with parents of toddlers sometimes, like, because that mom could have chosen, and I'm sure she's a wonderful mom too, but we're just using this as an example because this is what we just had yesterday. She could have chosen to get into a power struggle with her toddler over that. She could have said, well, I'm going to make you now, if you run out there one more time, I'm going to put you in timeout. I'm going to sit you here and I'm going to strap you in.
That's right.
Or we're going to have to leave. Or if you do this again. But that's not understanding really where, first of all, it's not necessary, but it's also not understanding developmentally what he needs right then. Yeah. Okay, so yes, toddlers do need to know boundaries. They need to know you're in charge. But in that instance, it's so much better to avoid the power struggle. Right. I mean, if you were talking about, now, if it was an instance where you're on a platform waiting for a train and your child keeps trying to run onto the train tracks, yes, absolutely. Spank them, put them in their stroller, strap them in. Who cares about their tantrum? Because you need to keep them safe, and there's nothing else you can do at that time. That's right. That was not the situation here. And when you can avoid a power struggle, avoid it, because you have to save it for the big things. So the father, in looking to see what is this child's need, what is he really looking for, he's really looking for somebody to play with. Yeah. So let's go play. And you know what? That dad may have preferred to not play with that child at that time. He may have preferred to stand there and watch the soccer game. That's why he was there. But you know what? He made that sacrifice. And this is what really where the rubber hits the road for us as parents in saying no to ourselves.
That's right.
He had to say, no, I'm not going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do what this toddler wants me to do right now because this is what they need. Right. And in many ways, we are our children's servants. You're supposed to be there, and this is part of your own holiness.
That's right.
Of you saying your will, your obedience, in some ways, is to this vocation of parenting. And God is calling you to do this right now, to say, you know what? I'm not going to sit down and watch a football game on the NFL. I'm going to get up and play with my toddler because that's what they really need right now.
That's right.
And that's virtue.
And this is how having children form you.
That's right.
We're talking about enjoying your toddler years and what you need for them, but it's good for both of you. I mean, and that's where, in a natural situation, your child, you'll grow through these things with your child, and you'll grow. And you need that exercise of your will saying, no, I'm going to give of myself. I'm going to empty myself. I am going to look at this child, this really in some ways still very helpless child,
Absolutely.
And say, I'm going to give myself to them. And that's good for you because you're going to need to be continuing to do that. This is a new level, and it's a new level for them developmentally as well as for you spiritually and virtuously, that you've got to grow in that. So that's important.
And I think that it's important, too, that people say this a lot, but I'll just kind of emphasize about giving choices. And it is important that you give your child choices for what they want to wear or what they want to eat, but don't give them too many choices. It's like this or this. Don't say, what do you want to eat? You say, do you want to eat, peanut butter and jelly or macaroni and cheese or whatever. And so I know that there's good articles out there about giving your child choices. And that is definitely a very good strategy.
Because they're not an adult. And they can't make decisions in a blank space. You don't want to give them too much because they shouldn't have the burden. And we talked about this in another podcast, like on millennial parenting. Like you can't give them the burden of making all these choices. That's not their job as a little kid. But this is where, again, in certain instances, like what you may want to eat, or here's a choice between this outfit or this outfit, or things like that, giving them finite options and choices. But it's good for them to begin that process. Again, it's a building block because you want them to be able to have that level of decision making on a small scale, but beginning that process at this time.
I feel like there's so much to say, but
I
do you want
know.
to quick talk about tantrums real quick?
Yeah. So
When kids start freaking out.
Yeah. So tantrums.
always fun.
This is the beginning, like earlier.
Beginning of humility for parents.
It is, because you'll be in a store, and again, I've had this happen, and then we've nipped it in the bud, and I don't remember it with our later kids as much. You are going to be out in public, and your child's going to embarrass you because they're going to freak out. I mean,
At every age.
Right. This is true. Different ways to freak out.
But we're
later.
just talking about toddlers right now.
I'll use the classic example of you're in a checkout line and the kid sees a candy. Now, again, assuming they know what candy is and all of that, and they're like, I want it, right? And I have a phrase, we do not negotiate with terrorists. And I really believe that there is a damage that is created when you create something that is simply a want. And it becomes a need. Again, it's a distinction that toddlers don't always have between their needs and their wants, and it all seems like the same for them. But in that freak out, in that tantrum, it's like with the kid with the ball. You've got to make a choice. Is this a time where I'm gonna
Draw the line,
or am I gonna accommodate? And I believe in a tantrum situation, when they've really lost their control, you've got to figure out where your needs are for your child.
What do they really need?
Right, and then try to direct them that way. And for some, when they're freaking out, again, depending on the will of your child, if they're a really strong-willed child, you may not be able to, and you may just have to suffer through embarrassment. And don't get angry at your child. As you realize this, you're getting embarrassed, you're doing whatever, but it's not about you. Get over it. You're going to be embarrassed. This is going to be one of many times your children are going to embarrass you. So don't react to your child. And you are an adult. You have the ability to have more self-control than they do.
Right.
And so you want to draw them out when possible. And again, knowing your child, you might be able to distract them, to focus them and say, hey, if you're able to do X, Y, and Z when we get home, we'll do something special.
Right.
Or we'll focus on there. Because I think once you create habits, if they know that they can get what they want from having a tantrum, that's going to be danger for you.
You know what? If they have a tantrum and you give in to them, prepare yourself for more tantrums.
That's right. It's going to keep going.
Because they have learned, when I freak out, Mom and Dad will give me what I want. And that, I think, is one of the reasons that our younger children rarely had those tantrums, because they learned, because we became smarter parents as we got older, as we've learned, but they know this is a hard wall here.
That's right.
And when they know that,
and that Mom and Dad are united,
Yes.
because the thing is that if they bounce off one player, one parent off the other, and one of them parent might say, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this. Just give them the candy. Just give them the candy. And again, there might be a situation where that might be appropriate, because you are at your wit's end and you don't have the energy and the strength to deal with it at that moment. Get it. Mm-hmm. But in general, and as a rule, you're setting yourself up for more tantrums. So just recognize that every tantrum has to have a place. Now, I've heard some people say, well, if you're going to have a tantrum, go to your room and be safe and stay in there, and then come down when you're ready.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge, although we've done that, I'm not a huge believer in that. I believe there are, even at the young age, they can learn self-control, and they learn it by you and the consequences that you bring to that tantrum.
But the reality is that they have to have that message during these years that you are in charge,
Yes.
and they are not. If that message is not clearly established by the time that they're about 2 or 3 at the least, your life, especially during their teenage years, is going to be very, very difficult.
Yes.
So you must establish yourself as the absolute clear leader. You are not a peer with your child. You are the leader. And so, but within that, you also cannot be the kind of leader that is arbitrary. So it's good to have a routine for your child.
So true.
So they do have
Stability.
Stability and predictability
Yes.
within their life. If they're eating at any time, if they're sleeping at any time, they're playing at any time, then when you say, okay, it's time to do this, it's time to do that, they feel jerked around. That's how I would feel if somebody came into my life and was like, okay, you have to do this now. You have to do this now. Would that make me unpeaceful? Absolutely it would.
Right.
And so we have to realize, again, try to be empathetic towards your toddler and realize that they have so little control when we provide stability and routine. Now, for some people, that's very easy, but for some parenting personalities, it's more difficult to have a routine.
That's right.
And I recognize that. But you know what? It's the need of your child to have I don't even want to say a schedule, because a schedule seems very rigid, but just some kind of flow of your day that will help your child know what is predictable and what's going to happen. So anyway, so those are things that are important.
And so just to jump to kind of prayer, so you think about your toddler. This is really, again, a really beautiful, beautiful time, but they're very physical. They're very concrete. And this is where the Catholic Church, in general, it shines in so many ways, right? But for these age...
Catholic Church is great for toddlers.
It is, because we have the smells and the bells, and we have the
right.
physicality of our faith.
Right.
And so the things that to shape the young soul and the spirit of your child, to really draw them into things that are very tangible. There was this great, when we were on in the... I don't remember what church it was in, but in Rome, there is this holy water font.
I think it was St. Paul outside the walls.
Okay, and so there's this beautiful holy water font that has this small little child dipping their hand into the holy water font, and the devil is there fleeing this little child and being...
And the devil is like twice his size, like an adult-sized devil, like shielding his face away. We'll put a picture up on our website for this. But it's so beautiful.
And it's just like, through the sacraments, through God's grace, through just dipping his hand in the holy water font, the smallest of child is sending the devil away.
That's right.
And, so the holy water that they get, reminding them of their baptism. It's, how many kids want to actually swim in if you have one of those big baptismal fonts, or, and, you might be always pulling your child away. At least that's for us in our parish. We're a Holy Family parish. We have all these little kids, and they always seem to be drawn to the baptismal font or the holy water font, and they're like washing their hands or something.
And so, what do you do when they go over there? Of course, you don't let them jump in, but show them. Here, dip your hand, show them the sign of the cross, because they want to do something with the water. So show them what's the appropriate thing to do.
That's right.
Yes, swimming, no. Drinking, no. Blessing yourself, yes.
Right, and then physical stuff, like we have lots of friends who made a little booklet of holy cards, something physical that they can look at even during Mass, recognizing that your toddler isn't going to be intellectually absorbing everything that's going on, to bring them little books, holy books. What are those little physical tying things and all these different things that you can give your child during Mass, so that we're not a big believer. We did a whole podcast on kids at Mass. We're not a big believer in feeding your children during Mass. We believe that even from the earliest, we don't subscribe to that at all. And again, if you need to do that, God bless you, but we don't think it's necessarily appropriate, and it doesn't lead to habits that we want to continue later. But them having a book or coloring during Mass,
like when we would go to Stations of the Cross, I have this Stations coloring book that I have a PDF of on my computer, and I print it out, and when we're all saying the stations, they're coloring in the stations book.
Right.
And I do like kids drawing on something during Mass. I think that's an appropriate.
That goes for even beyond toddlers.
Right. And we usually take that away during Eucharist.
Right.
During the Eucharistic prayer, they just have nothing. And if you were to take your toddler in the back of church, the one thing that I would just highly recommend that you do is not to put them down. Hold them. Don't teach them that we go in the back of church to run around.
Right. And it's hard, again, for our parish, where you have lots of kids, and then there are other kids that are all running around. What I found is that when I take a kid into the back, and there are other kids that are running around in the children's chapel or in the quiet room, it really is tempting to just let them go. But what we want to do is we want to say that we're taking them out to quiet them so they can rejoin the congregation, to rejoin our family at Mass.
And I have to say, too, that 9 times out of 10, this is an easier thing for Dad to do. Just because dads
physically
are just bigger. They're just bigger, and they're stronger arms, and easier for dads to stand up and hold a toddler in the back. Even though, obviously, I've done it as well, but it's usually easier. But we got to wrap this up. But I just want to kind of say... this time, one of the purposes of enjoying your toddler is because you really need to bond with them, because that emotional bond that you have with them is for their entire life. It's the layers of an onion, okay? Like the innermost layers. You're setting this foundation. And even though I know some moms just really, really beat themselves up over how frustrated they get with their kids. God's grace is there. God's mercy is there. If you're continuing to try, if you're continuing to go to confession, if you're continuing to ask God's grace, don't worry about your mistakes, but just really just love them and really make it a point to not be distracted by screens.
Yeah.
Because many young parents today have always grown up with computers, with iPhones, with all of that. And when you are with your child, you are sending a very, very dangerous message. And I say this to dads too, because I think dads sometimes tend to get lost in things rather than people.
That's right.
There's a real temptation there. When you come home from work, leave your phone in your room.
That's right.
Moms, if you have not developed I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No,
but
please, that's fine.
if you have not developed a habit of discipline with your phone and with the electronics up until this point, when you have a toddler, you must do that. You must have, this is what we're doing with our teenagers even, but you must have certain times when you are browsing the internet or where you're, whatever, talking to people and ongoing chats and things like that. But you also have to have time when you're not doing that, because your toddler needs to see you engaged with them. They need so much engagement.
Yeah. And just during this time, you're filling up their emotional bank account, and the platform upon which you are going to set them up for their life is how you pour yourself out. Especially, again, this is such a huge developmental time, and we want and we need our children to be bonded to us in a way that will be a lifeline for the rest of their life. This is a core of their identity. And this goes for us, even if you weren't given this, there is an opportunity here for you to give. And in giving, I know I myself experienced God's grace in a way that I didn't fully appreciate before in giving myself away to my child.
Right.
Realizing how much God loved me through loving this little kid.
Right.
And it's so important to fill that up for your child so that they know first and foremost they're your son, they're your daughter, and that they are well loved. And from that identity, from that emotional bond, you then have an opportunity to teach, because they will listen to those that they're emotionally attached to. Mm-hmm. That is what a toddler, who they learn from. They don't learn, like you said it, they don't learn as well in a group setting at this point in their lives. They're learning from somebody they're very emotionally attached to. So let that be you, so that you can be that shepherd, that parent for them in a very profound way at this time.
And I'm telling you that no iPad app or iPhone app is going to teach them as much as you will.
Right.
They do not
Even if you are flawed and don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. Even if you are flawed, you are much better than an iPad or some kind of screen for your toddler. There have been very strong arguments made that kids under 5 should not be in front of screens.
At all.
Ever. At all. And definitely toddlers, because they are so physical, they need that physical time to be doing stuff.
Right.
Like they need to be doing stuff, and they need to be relating with people. They need to be relating with you, even though I know it's so easy. It's so easy to just park them in front of a screen so you can get some stuff done. And maybe that's something appropriate to do for 15 or 20 minutes. But you got to be so careful, because they have such needs for emotional attachment and for physical exploration. And you have a responsibility for this precious, precious child that God's given you.
And you are the best parent for your child.
Absolutely.
You have God's grace.
Do not doubt it.
And at this point, they're not looking for heavy intellectual anything, right? They're just looking for love.
That's
and
right.
that love is the best teacher. Your love for them, as imperfect as you are, your love is exactly what they need. And we want to just encourage you to don't get caught up with the mistakes you've made. Deal with it, work it through, but you and your spouse together as a united front, if you will, to have these conversations. How are you going to deal with the tantrums? How are you going to deal with them holding themselves together at Mass or at prayer time? How are you going to pray to them? Rosary beads, all these things that you're going to use to shape and fashion them so that they are going to develop into the people that God wants them to be.
Amen.
So enjoy this time. Celebrate this time. This is not a terrible Tuesday. This is a terrific Tuesday. This is an amazing time in the life of parenting. So soak it up and pour yourself out for your kid.
All right. Well, that was it was good to hear again, right? You know,
It is good to hear again.
and for those who had listened to it 8 years ago, and this was a refresher, it was for us as well. But there are some key things that I think we as parents need to be aware of, so we can really parent effectively our toddlers. And this is important for us, and something we have been focused. So the first takeaway is something we've really been focusing more and more on in our ministry and in our work is delighting in your children.
Right.
That's true for all ages. That your kids need to know that they are loved and enjoyed just for who they are and not for anything else, but particularly toddlers, which sometimes can be a challenge, right?
Yeah.
That you need to just spend time relaxing and being in their presence. It communicates that you delight in them.
Good.
Toddlers also challenge us to begin by saying yes to them, because the reality is their needs. Okay,
When
sorry.
we say that's okay. When they challenge us, this is what we said in the podcast. They challenge us to say yes to them and to their needs, and we say no to ourselves and to our own desires. And why that is that's why parenting is the path to holiness, right? This is why parents get paid the big bucks.
That's right.
Is because we have to learn how to say no to ourselves and yes to somebody else, and that is a good thing. In the podcast, we also talk about giving choices. And, you know, there's a big emphasis on that in parenting, which I get it. And it's good to give choices, but don't burden your toddler by giving them too many choices. It's like this or this. And I was actually thinking about this today when we had our granddaughter at Mass, and she was trying to climb up on the little
pew.
thing that held the books.
Oh, yeah,
You know, and she was going to break it. And I didn't give her a choice. I didn't say, oh, you can get down by yourself or I can get you down. I just looked at her and I said, get down. And she did. You know, it's like, there's sometimes, sure, give a choice, but don't do it too much. That's like ridiculous.
Right.
Sometimes you just got to say, hey, get off of there. And they listen.
And as your toddler has a tantrum, right? Maybe yours would, right? But you have to ask the question as a parent and say, what is a need that isn't being fulfilled right now?
Right.
You know, because you want to go,
You don't want to be a jerk about it.
right. And you don't want to react, right? So you want to move from a reaction to really responding to that need. Because if, again, it might be illegitimate or it might be exaggerated or it might be all these other things, but when you get a chance to look behind and see from their eyes and see what the real need is, through your calmness, through your kind of cool-headedness, you're going to help show them how to navigate and how to respond more appropriately. You know, because there's a clear message that we're teaching them. Hey, we're stable.
That's right.
Your emotions as a toddler, in the tantrum particularly, right, are going to be up and down and all that. Well, as a parent, I want to be that sure fixed point. And so I want to look behind the tantrum, see what the need is, and respond to that so that they get a clear picture of what calmness looks like.
And I think that also helps solidify in their mind that you're in charge.
Right.
And last thing for toddlers is that routine and stability are key. When little ones have a natural flow to their day that's predictable, they tend to be more peaceful when they know what's going to happen. This happens, then this happens, then this happens. Okay, so a couple things for you to talk about with your spouse. First of all, just consider, what are your natural responses to your toddlers? You know, what do you think about that? Are you happy with your response to them? Or you're like, you know what? These are things that we want to change and do differently. Next, what are your toddler's emotional outbursts like? Maybe you have a toddler who tends to tantrums, or maybe not. But if they do, well, what tends to trigger them? And then ahead of time, think about how can you respond to that?
And we talked about the value of routines and stability for our kids. So what is our normal routine for our children? And is this working for them? Again, it's kind of, examination of just the life that's going on in the home, because that's so important for our kids. So what does that normal routine look like? And finally, what do we do with our toddlers at Mass, right? This is a question we get a lot, right? Is this good plan? Is it working? Is it effective? And how do we do that maybe a little bit differently to be more effective, being age appropriate to our kids?
Okay, let's go ahead and just end with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we thank you for all of these parents and their children. We ask that you bless these kids that you give these parents the wisdom that they need to truly love them and to be a model of God's love, of your love, Lord, for their children. And Lord, we ask this in your name.
Amen. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.